And I just want to welcome you to the medicine of Morgan le Fay. Morgan le Fay is my thing. I love her so much. And I'm so excited to just spend the next about 40 minutes just laying down the biggest download of everything I can possibly fit into your brain about Morgan le Fay that I can this Wednesday afternoon. So I'd love it if we could just take a breath. Breathing into our intention to learn more about Morgan le Fay today. Thinking about what has called us here. What image of Morgan le Fay comes to our mind when we think of her? What little whisper is she sending to us that is bringing us here to learn more about this powerful goddess, this spirit, this woman, this fictional character, this legend, this myth, who is both terrible and petty and awful, and gorgeous, celestial, divine, and wonderful. So just breathing in to your intention and curiosity today as we get started. So I would love to introduce myself. My name is Demelza Fox. I run Rockstar Priestess, and I am the head mistress of the Morgan le Fay Mystery School, where I train super smart, super badass priestesses through the mysteries of Morgan le Fay to be really good at what they do. That is my desire and my mission in the world, and that's what you'll find me doing most of the week long. And I have been obsessed with Morgan le Fay ever since I was a kid, and ever since I found out that she might just be more than a storybook character. I've been hooked ever since that day. So I would love to begin with, who is Morgan le Fay? Morgan le Fay is Morgan le Fay she is from the Arthurian legends and the Arthurian mythos. And these stories were written down in the early medieval times. So starting at around 1150, and this story and kind of myth, modern myth, was recycled and reused and turned into all kinds of things, highbrow literature and pulpy fiction, all the way from 1150 to now. And we still have pulpy fiction books about Morgan le Fay and King Arthur coming out year after year after year. It's like a divine inspiration in our Western culture that just keeps giving and just cannot be forgotten. Morgan le Fay first appeared in these stories, and her first written mention is in around 1140 or 1116, forgotten the exact date, by a chap called Geoffrey of Monmouth. And he was a cleric from Monmouthshire, kind of the Welsh side of the UK. And he wrote about Morgan le Fay in his book, The Life of Merlin. Earlier on, he'd written a book called The Kings of Britain, Regium Britanniae. I'm not going to remember the correct names today. Sorry, folks. And that was the chronicles of the big kings. And when I say chronicles, I don't mean historical chronicles like we do now. I mean the chronicles. So he talked about more the oral legend and stories. So he talked a lot about Arthur in there. And in his Life of Merlin, he mentioned Morgan le Fay. And he talks of Morgan le Fay like some wild, enchanting fairy being and goddess. This woman who held all the powers of the plants, the powers of healing. She was able to shapeshift. She was the most learned woman in all of England, so beautiful and warm and seductive and just the most wonderful woman you could ever imagine. And that is her first description into our written word. Of course, in the Celtic legends and in the Celtic times, by Celtic times, I mean Druidy times, you know, pre-Roman Britain, we didn't actually have any written down. Let me just mute somebody there. They didn't write anything down. Their stories were all oral stories. So we don't have any specific knowledge or myths of the ancient Celtic gods and goddesses, which is extremely frustrating for us present day witches and priestesses and devotees trying to look to the past and know what came before. And when we're thinking about Celtic legend and the Celtic goddesses, we're looking to a couple of core sources. We're looking at the Mabinogion, which is actually pronounced the Mabinogi. I'm sorry, Welsh people. And this is a collection, a Welsh collection of tales that was written, can't remember the date, sometime in the medieval times. And this was an oral recording of all the stories and legends that the Christian clerics in the monasteries wanted to write down. Yeah, so it came from a Christian lens. And through this book, the Mabinogi, we get the context for most of our modern day, what we would consider Celtic gods and goddesses, like Branwen, Ceridwen, Rhiannon, those guys, yeah? But in that book, they are never explicitly named as goddesses. At any point, they are never called a goddess. This could be because the Christian chaps who are writing this down didn't want to like say, oh, by the way, here's a big fancy lady goddess on a horse. You could talk to her instead of our god. Maybe they didn't want to do that. Maybe it was because they weren't seen as gods or goddesses. We don't really know. And there are some schools of thoughts that goddesses like Ceridwen were legends and not goddesses. But I think this is part of the magic of Celtic mythology, Celtic divinity, and of Morgan le Fay, this great shape-shifting unknowingness. So when we have Morgan le Fay, she has roots in the Mabinogi, not specifically named, but in the form of Modron, who was we think, a Welsh mother goddess. And her ancestry as a goddess extends to Modron, this Welsh goddess whose name means mother, who had Mabon, who was the son, and Mabon and Modron appear in the stories of the Mabinogion where King Arthur gets involved. And we also have the Matrona, and this was a Romanized deity, or as we know it, it's a Romanized deity of 3 mother goddesses, great mother goddesses who were worshipped throughout the then Roman Empire. So let's think around between 0 AD to 400 AD when it all collapsed. Okay, so we have these 3 matronae goddesses, these 3 mother goddesses who were worshipped particularly at rivers, at lakes, and at shorelines throughout Western Europe. There are rivers named after them I think in France and maybe Germany, I'm not really sure, but there are rivers named after the Matronae. And we also, of course, have the Morrigan. And in Irish mythology, we have so much more written about the Irish gods and goddesses that came before the rise of Christianity, just because the clerics, the Christian guys who were there before, wrote them down. And some speculated that the Christian priests of the early Celtic churches were Druid folk who had just subsumed themselves into the new system and wanted to record their storytelling and knowledge and legacy through this new writing way. Because the Druids could write, they just chose not to for sacred purposes. So we have the Morrigan from our Irish ancestry from Morgan le Fay, and the Morrigan is this very complicated goddess of battle, of war, of sovereignty, of the land, of earth, and of power. She is the one who chooses heroes and chooses kings and is the challenger and the initiator in many of the same roles as Morgan le Fay is, as we will learn about very, very soon. And the thing about Celtic goddesses, when we are looking at ancient goddesses, we have a very westernized patriarchal way of categorizing goddesses. We go, oh, that's Aphrodite, she's a goddess of love, let's put her in that box. Oh, that's Morrigan, she likes war, let's put her in that box. Oh, this is Freya, she is a sexy lady who sleeps with dwarves, she's a frivolous lover goddess, let's put her there. But actually, especially in the Celtic world, there was no, you are just one thing. Every single goddess that we know about from the ancient Celtic world is absolutely multifaceted. They are lovers and mothers and warriors and queens, and they fall prey to victimhood, and they are humans and deities and fairies and all things in between. And I believe this is because as women, and we're looking at the goddess side of this and the divine feminine side of this, just like women and folks today, The goddesses were not just one thing. They were multifaceted and able to be all things at once. So when we're looking at Morgan le Fay, she, like many other goddesses, like Ceridwen, like Morgan, like Rhiannon in the Celtic pantheon, are so many things, a mini pantheon in one goddess. So the Celtic goddesses can't just be pigeonholed into one thing, and Morgan le Fay is a very big example of that. Morgana, the name Morgan, it's modern. Our knowledge of this goddess, whatever she may have been in the past, and this is where we have to really get wash our hands of this idea that only the way things were done in the past is real and nothing else is. We're working with divine energy here. So whatever Morgan le Fay was called in the past, it probably wasn't Morgan le Fay. And when we're working with this Morgan le Fay, who is here with us today, she is a modern aspect of the Celtic great goddess. She is our lens from this century to understand the great Celtic goddess of love, wisdom, truth, beauty, of sovereignty and the earth. She's big, but Morgan le Fay, that name, this way of looking at her is not an unbroken lineage. And that does not make it any less powerful. A rose by any other name would smell as sweet, right? Just because we don't know the name that the ancient druids or the ancient peoples of these isles would have called their great moon, earth, sovereignty, magic goddess, doesn't mean that our name doesn't still work, right? And one of the key things about Morgan le Fay is, and many of the Celtic goddesses and the women of the Arthurian stories who reflect these facets of the Celtic goddess, is that they draw their power from the inner world. They are goddesses of the divine feminine, of the lunar, of the inner, of magic and mystery, shape-shifting and change. So that deep power that is a watchword of Morgan le Fay comes from within, and from those feminine magics of the moon, of water, and that feminine flowing, ever-changing element of wisdom and of deep, deep love. Okay. So if at any point during this talk you have any questions, just write them in the chat, and then I will answer them when I get a chance. So we've talked about Morgan le Fay's heritage as a goddess. Let's talk about what she is and who she is. Well, Morgan le Fay, Morgan the fairy, the word Morgan means sea born, and she is a water goddess through and through. I mean, in my personal opinion, she's water with a bit of fire. That's my own view on it. She is a water goddess. She is the goddess of rivers, waters, and seas. She is deeply associated with the West. And in most traditions, not necessarily the one I work with all the times, but in most Western esoteric traditions, the West is the direction of water. And it is the direction you travel into when you want to go into magic, when you want to go into dreaming, and when you want to seek the divine feminine. Morgana is known as the Queen of Avalon. She is deeply, deeply connected with Avalon, this sacred, mystical Western Isle, which is a heavenly isle. It is a place of deep abundance where the whole earth just gives and gives and gives everything from it that you could possibly need. It is a place of deep healing and deep wisdom and spiritual knowing. And this is the realm that Morgan le Fay is queen of. And this realm lies in the West. You have to reach it across the water. Morgan le Fay is a water goddess through and through. Rivers, lakes, wells, puddles. That is where you will find Morgan le Fay. And of course, in the ancient Celtic worldview, anywhere where the three sacred places meet, the sky, the sea, or the water, and the land, is a holy, holy place. And of course, this water element goes really deep with Morgan le Fay, and not necessarily very well known is that she's not just a British goddess. Her name doesn't just appear in Britain. She has places sacred to her all across Western Europe. Brittany in France is a very sacred place to her. She has had stories and legends written about her in France, in the Netherlands, in Germany, in Spain, in Italy. She goes all over the place. And she's actually, in some stories, it is said that she has a sacred home. Her sacred home of Avalon, or portal to Avalon, is on the island of Sicily in Italy. So she gets around as Morgan le Fay. She's not just here, stuck in Glastonbury, as we think nowadays. In Brittany, we have these mermaids called the Marie Morganas, who are mermaids. They are half woman, half fish, and they are deeply connected with the water. In Italy, we have this term called the Fata Morgana, which is a mirage that appears over the ocean on a hot day, where it looks like there's a castle floating in the sky, or there's an island floating in the sky. That is called a Fata Morgana. So she has this deep connection with water and with mirages too, and mermaids, because she's a water goddess. Hey. And of course, as a water goddess, she is deeply connected with the moon. And as a moon goddess, it means she is deeply connected with the feminine, with feminine mysteries, with the inner world and with the underworld, with the reflection within. As a moon goddess, she is very much about beginnings and endings, transitions of the tides of life. And she holds magic as a core part of who she is. It is her blood, it is her bones. She is a magical, magical, magical goddess. And that's why in the modern world, in the modern pagan world, she tends to be known foremost as a goddess of magic and witchcraft, all dressed up all black and gothic with fabulous raven cloaked dresses and things. So she's known as a magic goddess first and foremost, because that is what has been left to us from the Arthurian stories, which loved to take Morgan le Fay, one of the few women in the Arthurian legends who had real magical power, who could make stuff happen with just her words and her intentions. And she is known as a great sorceress. And if you think of any TV show where Morgan le Fay is present, from The Mists of Avalon to Merlin on the BBC, magic is a big part of who she is. And that magic is almost always, Mists of Avalon aside, used to show her as evil. That's because magic in those old stories really does represent power. And for, let's think, in 1100 to 1500, 1700, the idea of a noble woman with that much power would have been a little bit uncomfortable for that kind of society. They were still a bit afraid of ladies back then. They weren't quite sure how to deal with us. And from that aspect, Morgan le Fay is so much about power and choosing to be powerful no matter what everyone else tells you to do. She is this rebel goddess in that she was taking a stand and being very clearly very powerful, even if the culture of the time thought that that meant she was evil or a bitch or whatever. She did it anyway. She is all about power, is this lady. Moon and sea, moon goddess, beginnings and endings, and she has a very clear ninefold nature. When we are looking at ancient holy women within the Celtic world, at this glance, I'm taking Celtic world to mean non-Roman, Northern Western European world. We have this number 9 that comes up again and again and again as a sacred number. In Anwen, Anun, the old word for Avalon, the original Old Welsh word for Avalon, Anun, there is a cauldron of inspiration where 9 maidens cool the broth with their breath. In the writings of Julius Caesar and his mate, whose name may begin with a C, I'm not quite sure, they talk about enclaves and islands where holy women from the Celtic cultures would dwell, prophetesses, healers, who dwelled in numbers of 9. 9 is such a powerful magic number for this ancient Celtic world. And Morgan le Fay is very much a ninefold goddess. She is known to rule Avalon with her sisterhood of 8 other queens, and 8 other queens, not she is the super boss and she has 8 servants, 8 queens. She rules in community. And this, I believe, really points to her nature as a moon goddess and as a goddess of the divine feminine, because the divine feminine works in collaboration and groups. It's not a triangle where there's one person at the top who leads. Here's a triangle. It's not a triangle where there's one person at the top who leads and everyone else who kind of supports and follows through. It's a circle. Everyone has an equal amount of wisdom and input in this way of looking at things. So she is of a ninefold nature, and we'll talk more about that in a second. And what I love about Morgan le Fay is that she is a rose goddess. And by that I mean Morgan le Fay is deeply connected with Avalon, which is from the Welsh Avalon, which means apples, and it is the Isle of Apples. In Welsh mythology, tradition, folk tales, however you want to spin it, Morgan le Fay is often, in her stories, she is interchangeable with Madron, that mother goddess of the Welsh culture we talked about earlier. And their stories kind of overlap, and in some versions of the tales it's Modron, and in some versions of the tales it's Morgan. And she is known, Morgan, Modron, as the daughter of Avalach, who is the king of Avalon. This link with apples and Avalon is so important for Morgan le Fay. And the apple is both the fruit of wisdom and the fruit of love in so many cultures, Celtic culture included. And what is fascinating about apples, particularly for me, because I am a Morgan le Fay lady and an Aphrodite lady, and I actually know quite a lot of other women who hold both these things, is that apples are a fruit of the rose family. Just like roses, apples have 5 petals around them, and they live from the same family. They're descended from the same original mother plant as roses are. And Morgan le Fay holds this lineage of apples and roses, and her way of being and her magic is almost like a Celtic version or a facet of the same essential goddess truth that we find in the great goddesses of the Near East, of Ishtar and Isis and Aphrodite and Astarte. All of these goddesses who are both goddesses of roses and apples and goddesses of the underworld. Goddesses who go on that journey down, 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 like Isis went into the underworld to rescue her, to rescue and put together her husband Osiris. Like Ishtar went into the underworld to confront her underworld self, Ereshkigal. Like Morgan le Fay, who perpetually ferries souls across the lake of Avalon to the Isle of the Dead and the Isle of Healing. So she is of this great lineage, this Venusian lineage of goddesses. And when we look at the planet Venus, who is the energetic resonance for many of these topics, many of these goddesses, the planet Venus has this retrograde underworld 5-petaled magical star pattern, and that journey is characterized by ascent and descent, and Morgan le Fay holds this too. She is a goddess of both brightness, of the land of beauty and everlasting life and joy and apples and never-ending parties and sexy times in the orchards. She holds that, and she is the goddess who holds those who are grieving, who takes the dead across the journey, who sits with the people who are deep in the underworld of their current life, grieving, crying, feeling until they can get through to the other side. She holds both of these things because she's a great goddess. She's not I am a goddess of blacksmiths, or I am a goddess of sexy times and perfumes. She's a goddess of everything. She is a great goddess. So the way I understand and work with Morgan le Fay, as you know, I've been a Morgan le Fay obsessive for oh so long. I work with Morgan le Fay in an 8-fold/9-fold way. What a surprise. She is a 9-fold goddess. And I'm just going to share my screen for a second so you can see this pretty thing that I made. So for me, I run the Morgan le Fay Mystery School, and we work with these 8 faces of Morgan le Fay. And here they are. Woohoo! And I like to see her in this way, because when we're looking at a great goddess, it's like any great god or great being. It's just so big, our little minds can't quite grasp it. So in my mystery school, we break her down into these different aspects. And we have Morgan le Fay in the center. She is the 9th aspect. She is the goddess of Avalon, the shapeshifter, the goddess of the moon, who holds these core threads that go through every single one of her other aspects: magic, love, truth, wisdom, power, and transformation. Okay, these are the core seeds of Morgan le Fay. That's what she cares about. She's very much into getting you to claim your power, figure out who you are, so then you can go and be of effect in this world. And with Morgan le Fay, in her stories, in the Arthurian stories, she is a goddess who is half in this world and half in the other world of Avalon. She spends her time between. So she is really asking us to fully be here and fully incarnate, to take that wisdom from the other world and anchor it here, so we can make a difference here. Okay, so this is my wheel of Morgan le Fay. Isn't it pretty? I am very proud of it. Queen needs a sword, I know that much. Shadow needs a crow, but we're good. And these are the 8 aspects I work with in Morgan le Fay Mystery School, and these are the 8 aspects of Morgan le Fay that I feel really help us to understand her great big shape-shifting nature more easily. Because like all of us, she is not one thing. She is so many different things at once. She is a walking contradiction like everybody here. And these faces, I find, make a really good way to really understand who she is. And of course, on our little beautiful picture here, which is a picture of the wheel of the Morgan year, it has the time of year that she is most associated with, her quality, her symbol, and her herbs, because Morgan le Fay is a healer renowned for herb use. So we got herbs for every single aspect. Drink in the picture. I'm very, very, very proud of it. I just wanted to share with you a little bit about each of those aspects and what the deal is there, because she's so big. It's very hard to get it all in a big overview. So let's start with Morgan le Fay as Shadow, which is the time we're entering into now with Halloween and Samhain. As goddess of shadow, she is death doer. In her earliest stories and in her latest stories, throughout the whole telling of all the Arthurian myths over the last 1,000 years, she is always the goddess who stands at the edge of the lake, ready to take the dying King Arthur across the waters to the holy Isle of Avalon. She is the psychopomp. She is the one who goes between the worlds and who rules in the underworld as she does in the upper world. Of course, Avalon is the other world, and in the other world, we have fairies living there who are beings of light and life, and we have the ancestors, the dead that have gone before. Oh, thank you, Donna. I love my music. We have the ancestors and the dead who party in Avalon too. So Morgan le Fay is intimately connected with death. And many, many of us who are drawn to this path of the priestess and this path of Morgan le Fay are drawn because a big part of being a priestess and doing this work and being spiritually useful in the world is being able to hold people through these big transitions. It's very challenging, but it's what the world needs, right? And that's what the world is all about, these huge, difficult transitions between transitions and passages of life, right? So Morgan le Fay is a death doula. She really governs the big transitions in our life, and she shows us how to hold and get through our fear, our despair, our depression, our anxiety, all of our shadow aspects of being human, because we are human, just like in many of her stories she was. When she was a human, she wasn't a wonderful, perfect, lovely lady all the time in the stories. She was a right little dick sometimes. She would create petty messes and try and kill people just to prove a point and be all kind of snarky and unhelpful. She was not always a good person in the stories. And that's partly because the people writing the stories had a kind of a bit of a misogynist agenda, but also because when we're looking at these stories of gods being assholes, it's not, gods aren't supposed to be perfect, untouchable things, okay? That is a modern, Western, very Christian, Judo, whatever point of view, where it's putting God out of this world, completely out of this world, above and beyond anything we could ever achieve. Yeah, separating God from humanity. Morgan le Fay is of the school of goddess where our divinity is in our humanity. And humanity is kind of tricksy and terrible sometimes. And that is still where God lives. So Morgan le Fay really holds our hand and takes us on that journey. And in Mystery School, we work with the shadow, very particularly at Samhain, but all year round, because it's so deep and important. It is the spiritual journey, isn't it? Learning how to look within and deal with all the stuff we didn't want to look in to find. That's the whole point. We have Morgan le Fay as High Priestess. Now, this is the Morgan le Fay of deep spiritual wisdom. In the ancient world, it would have been that wisdom and inspiration aspect of Avalon. In the modern world, we find ourselves very inspired by people such as Morgan in Mists of Avalon, and that thread of devotion, that Priestess of Avalon edge. And a little tidbit for you. If you read the Mists of Avalon or watched the movie, and we have Morgaine as the main character, Morgaine, written M-O-R-G-A-I-N, is actually just pronounced Morgane, because Morgaine is the French, old French way of spelling Morgan. Morgan, Morgane, yeah? So it's actually pronounced Morgane. It's old French, baby. So when we are thinking about the High Priestess aspect of Morgan le Fay, and that is what I call this devotional, slightly removed, peaceful, this divine wisdom aspect of Morgan le Fay that we can connect with. Often in the modern world, this is really a really good book to vibe into this. In the modern world, of course, is The Sea Priestess by Dion Fortune, who is kind of the all-star occultist of the 20th century. She was a boss ass bitch, and she was a powerful witch and visionary woman. And she has her own, she really had her very big connection with Morgan le Fay. And for her, she believed that Morgan le Fay was a real life priestess of Atlantis. She believed that when Atlantis fell, my views on Atlantis are out. I don't have any, it's not my way of looking at things, but it's good to talk about. She really believed that when Atlantis fell, which could have been the Mediterranean, which could have been in the Pacific, the priests and priestesses of Atlantis went north and landed on the shores of England. And the name Morgan, which means from the sea, and Merlin, which means very similar, from the sea, they were titles of priests and priestesses. So for Dion Fortune, Morgan le Fay, big deal for her. She was a ancestress of this Atlantean lineage. It's not kind of what I play with in my work with her, but it's, for some people, that's like a thing that really clicks stuff in. So I wanted to make sure you knew about that. So we have her as Shadow, as High Priestess. We have Morgan le Fay as Sister, and we're connecting back on with this ninefold nature, this triple matrone that we were talking about, the woman at the rivers and the fords and the fords. And when we're thinking about as Sister, Morgan le Fay is known as a goddess of the mists. She is here and she is not here. She is a shapeshifter. She is that breath of magic, which is always, always very, very subtle, right? And this very liminal aspect of Morgan le Fay's sister, where that really, really, really comes in really strongly. Because for Morgan le Fay, she works in community. She works in groups. She works in her ninefold sisterhood. She works in her, even in the late medieval stories of Morgan le Fay, she's usually chilling with a posse of other badass enchantresses. She's not like a lone wolf ever. She has always moved in community. And this is a really, really important aspect of who she is, and a really important aspect for modern women and folks training as priestesses and priestesses of Morgan le Fay and of Avalon, because we don't do stuff on our own. That's not how the divine feminine works. It's about groups and communities. Morgan le Fay holds this so freaking strong. And most women and folk who are drawn to really work with Morgan le Fay, they will be taking that Morgan role in their life somehow. They will be stepping up and leading community, or assisting in community, or being that sister in life somehow. It's just how it works, my friends. We have Morgan le Fay as enchantress. Of course, she's the daring witch and enchantress with this huge legacy of being able to work magic and make stuff happen. In the ancient 1,000-year-old medieval tales of Morgan le Fay, many of the women had dreams and wishes, but Morgan le Fay, because she had magic, she was one of the very few that could make what she wanted happen. And on that note, as a fairy lover, she also holds that ability to speak her desires into reality, and she holds that fairy edge as well. The Le Fay title in Morgan le Fay usually just actually refers to a magical woman. So it could be Demelza le Fay, Demelza the magical lady, Camilla le Fay, Alison le Fay, yeah? So it's referring to that edge of, this woman is a magical woman, she does magic stuff, yeah? That's what it's really holding. And with Morgan le Fay as fairy lover, there are so many tales of fairy queens who come through the other world and choose and anoint the right leaders, the right kings, the heroes. She is the one that grants power to others. Sovereignty goddess. She is the one who initiates and challenges people to claim their rightful place, right? I mean, there's even a myth about Morgan le Fay marrying Julius Caesar. Yeah, so could you get more of a, I have the Morgan le Fay seal of approval, qualified bona fide hero than that, right? And as fairy lover, Morgan holds that sacred marriage aspect of Avalon. She is sexual. Her sexuality was, everyone was terrified of it in the old stories. She is very sexual. She is very alive, and she is filled with that erotic energy. And she holds those erotic, sensual, sacred marriage mysteries of Avalon. We think of priestesses of Avalon as, oh, I'm wearing blue and I think very kind, thoughtful thoughts. But there's always a sex aspect whenever there's God. Whenever you get deep enough into it, whoop, hello, it's got sexy, as far as I understand about goddess and sexuality anyway. She is a healer. Of course, she is known to be the most magical and knowledgeable woman with herbs, potions, and unguents, which is like an oily lotion, and all that kind of stuff in the medieval stories. And this is a very important bit of her lineage that we carry on in the Morgan le Fay Mystery School. We all learn about herbs, connecting with our sacred land around us in the Morgan le Fay Mystery School. And we are connecting with this lineage of priestesses as healers. And as little as we know about the ancient druids, and believe me, we know so very little. We have about less than 12 A4 pages of writing of actual evidence of the druids. It's crazy. We know that they definitely worked with herbs. Yeah. So this is a very important part of her lineage as a healer. And it's not just as a practical healer, like scrapes and cuts and things. She also holds that comfort and that presence and that ability to nourish ourselves, which she gently guides us into. And this is part of her role as great mother as well. She is the great mother of the Celtic world, of Avalon, of this Isle of Apples that just gives you everything you could possibly need. And she is the great mother of the Celtic people. She is just like the Morgan and Modron and the Matrone. She still holds that thread really, 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 really strongly. And it's a bit more abstract than her other roles, but it is a powerful, powerful part of who she is. And she holds the power of the queen, that woman who claims her power and doesn't let anybody fuck with it, right? She knows what she wants. And if you enter into a relationship with Morgan le Fay, this is going to be the thing you keep coming back to and keep getting pushed up against again and again. Because Morgan le Fay wants you to claim your power. And yeah, to claim your power, you have to go through all those Wheel of Morgan le Fay stuff, and you have to get the support you need from your sisters, and you have to face your shadow, and you have to be able to spiritually find some kind of peace and perspective and claim your desire and connect with your own healing. But it's all in service of your power, because you need to be powerful. That's, if you're drawn to work with Morgan le Fay, that's what she's all about. Okay, she is spiritual authority. She is the marriage of the inner world and the outer world. And I really believe that Morgan le Fay is part of this lineage of goddesses who are goddesses, divine, who are legends, who may or may not have been human once, who are actually here to tell us that our divinity is reached by us being more present, by us being more human, by us honoring and recognizing the sacredness of the human experience, the highs, the lows, the sadnesses and the joys. That is where Morgan le Fay is calling us to be. And in that, she is very much like, I believe, Mary Magdalene, another goddess I work a lot with. She is holding that same energy from a different place. She works with us as a power goddess to both get us to claim our power, our desire, and our way in the world, and to integrate our whole will, so we can do what we want, we can make a difference. And like her, instead of those poor women stuck in the courts of the Arthurian times going, oh, I wish my husband would come home, but nobody listens to me, we can go, right, I want a race car so I can go to my castle in Cornwall whenever I please. I speak it and it happens. Here we go. Yeah, Morgan has that power to enact her will on life, and she's a magic goddess, so that's part of it. We're not afraid of that kind of thing. Yeah, she is daring. She is about truth. She is here for her divine desire and purpose, and for you to discover what your purpose is. She wants you to really access that wisdom of Avalon and that great spiritual nurturance that comes from being connected to something bigger and deeper. And she really wants you to embrace your contradictory, shape-shifting nature. You can be an enchantress and a queen. That's fine. You can be an enchantress and a queen, and very occasionally, or more than occasionally, you can hide under your duvet. It's all a bit of a lot, yeah? You can be all of those things. That's what Morgan le Fay really calls us to do. She's a liminal goddess from the places in between. And what I would love to do now is, before I talk about how you can connect with Morgan le Fay and how you can start bringing her into your life and really invoking her to do this, I actually run a year-long program called Sister Year. Morgan le Fay Mystery School Sister Year is the first year of my Priestess training school. And it's a year with Morgan le Fay. So you go through all the phases on my beautiful wheel and go through all those initiations of a Priestess of Avalon, which Morgan le Fay holds so beautifully. These are all the parts of what it means to really embody the divine feminine in a way that builds community and helps us be really good humans. Yeah, fully here, fully fully here to experience human life and deal with other people, because the priestess is about community. She's not a lone witch in the forest that people only come to in emergencies. She's someone who's there holding the hands of everyone who needs her whenever she can. So my year with Morgan le Fay this year is kind of part spiritual adventure, part priestess training. Some people come in and they know they want to be a priestess, and some people come in and they just want an adventure with Morgan le Fay. And it's all about becoming a sister or sibling of Morgan le Fay, which means someone who is holding that energy of Morgan le Fay, who has been touched by her initiations, and who, of course, in this divine anthropos, the divine is human, the human is divine way, who is a reflection of Morgan le Fay in the world. And I'm really lucky because I hope we still have Cynthia here. We have Cynthia here who has to go in like 3 minutes. And I would love to invite Cynthia to share a little bit about her experience at Sister Year, because she's had a really crazy, profound year at Sister Year. Cynthia?
Yes, thank you. And yes, it was a very profound year. I had the joy of meeting Demi in person in Cambridge, and I could definitely testify of the embodiment of the energy of Morgan le Fay that she really brings to life. So it's interesting hearing how it's such a legend when throughout the year it's actually become such a different reality and a beautiful reality. And in my life, man, I mean, it has helped me in such profound ways. Where I was split before, I have found wholeness with myself. There's been soul retrievals. There's creating balance. And she is really the energy that we want to be working with this time, because she does. She stands for freedom and liberation through our authentic power. And she is magic, so we get to do it in such a fun way. And before this mystery school, that lone wolf card was so big on me that even when I was being told that there were sisters around me, it was so hard for me to see. But actually, this is such a big sisterhood for who you really are, no matter who it is. And I mean, I could literally rattle on forever on how good it is. But even in my other priestess trainings, do not be deceived by the low price, because the value of this program is phenomenal. It's very inexpensive for all the beauty and time and meditations and tools and books and playlists, and all the support that you get is just, yeah, it's just amazing. So thank you, Demi, and thank you for all the support and love and that you pour into the mystery school. It is definitely felt, and thanks for everything.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. That was so. And I wanted to speak to that lone wolf thing, because a lot of us who fall in with Morgan le Fay, we discover her through the witchy lens, because she's a goddess of witchcraft. And when we're in that witchy world, there is that lone wolf card, but it doesn't serve us when we're stepping into bigger spiritual service, when we're stepping into a priestess pathway, because walking the path of the priestess is always going to be about community and collaboration with others. And to do that, we have to be able to be comfortable being with others, to know what it's like to walk as a sisterhood, what it feels like to have sisters with you. And for many of us, we don't get that opportunity in our regular life. This is something that has to be taught and experienced in a sacred context, because let's be real, women, and let's start with women, let alone non-binary folks and trans folk and everything else, we've only really been able to hold power, vote, do what we want, make our own choices, have bank accounts for less than 100 years. Yeah. And that sister piece was kind of destroyed in the female lineage, because it is a big source of our power. And it's not just destroyed in it's men against women kind of way. It was destroyed for everybody. It was destroyed for men as well as women, as well as non-binary people, and as well as everybody else. And to be able to really step into spiritual service, we need that spiritual support to do it. You can't do everything on your own. And this ability to open to that support and knowledge that you don't have to be fighting an uphill struggle on your own all the time, that is a really key part of priestess training and a really key part of stepping into the way of the goddess, for sure. And I would love to invite, we have another past student with us, a beautiful Patty from, is it Kansas? Yeah, from Kansas, I remember. She was a sister in our very first mystery school about 3 years ago now. We're on our 4th cycle now. And Patty's an absolutely obscenely amazing witch. So I would love to hear what Patty has to share with you about her experience in mystery school.
Yeah, so I think that, before I started, I was kind of aimlessly knowing that there was a magical calling. I was practicing on my own. I wanted to start a business, but nothing was ever taking purchase. I would say that as soon as I committed to Sister Year, there was an initiation. Like, Morgan is an initiatrix, and she really went into action. And before the program even started, when I committed to it, she was challenging me and gently leading me into stepping into my own power, which was a big thing. And I can't even pick one or two. I can't pick. There were so many lessons and aha moments throughout the whole process and journey. But it was a personal alchemy, an alchemy of self, and learning that she was always there. I think my connection to Morgana had felt a little inconsistent before, even though I was completely devoted and enamored. I was able to really deepen into easily recognizing her energy and feeling her presence always. And even though I think that for me, she is sometimes a subtle goddess, she is so consistent and always just around me like a gauzy blanket. I don't know.
Yeah.
And constantly reminding me of her presence in these really soft and beautiful ways, although that's not her only aspect. The ability to deepen into and to look at, and the challenge to look at all of her aspects was really helpful. There are certainly, I think for everybody, certain faces of Morgan that we relate to more easily, and then some that are a little bit more of a challenge. And the ones that I found a little bit more challenging, the ones that I found I didn't instantly relate to, spending a season in contemplation of those and deepening into them with Demi's meditations and rituals and things like that, initiated and kind of cracked open this continual unfolding of these different aspects of her. I of course, she would always be a lifelong piece for me, but it's made her even more relevant to the different aspects of my life and the things that come up over the years. She's there, and there are ways for me to relate to her in all of those aspects. And there's not a part of my life that she doesn't fit into and have answers and energy for. And so those are just a few of the pieces of magic that have come from it. But she used Sister Year because it's been like 2 years since I've completed Sister Year now. And since then, there has been so much momentum. She used Sister Year, I think, as a little transformation container to alchemize, everybody in the circle. But for me, since then, so many things have happened. And she just immediately afterwards, Morgana, started lining up plans for me. She's got plans for all of us. And once Sister Year was over and that container had really shaken us up a little bit, then things just started lining up, and she's made my dreams come true and has made things that I struggled towards for years, things that I didn't dare mention I dreamed to be, because I didn't think they were possible, within reach and attainable, because that's part of her vision for me. And so it's just because she's a goddess of transformation, it's constant self-transformation. And I'm so much more in flow with who I am. There's so much that I could speak to, but that's just
I feel you. And I so feel the bit about Sister Year is this strange magical container where you go on that, it's kind of like that rose descent where you go down to the underworld and then you come back up and then you come out the end and you're like, oh, that was wonderful. And then Morgan's like, great, here's your 10-point plan, go get ready, I got stuff for you to do, go forth, do your stuff. Now you know what your thing is. That's what she's done. I can think of so many sisters this year and so many sisters last year. And I can think of so many dreams that have been fulfilled and new businesses that have been started, because she kind of kickstarts you into where you're supposed to be. And I really want to ask, because I'm super curious, which aspects were the hardest for you to connect with? And has that changed?
Initially, it was the Queen. Not that I didn't appreciate or understand the Queen, but I have had a lot of trouble embodying that sovereignty and understanding on an internal level how it feels to be sovereign. And so that's been a more longer unfolding, and it's been really, really beneficial. The Great Mother aspect was hard for me. I really resonate with her shadow side and the devious parts of her, because that really has liberated me to appreciate my shadows. But the Great Mother aspect was something that took a little bit more getting used to. And I would say about halfway through that season, I struggled with it at first. And then immediately, that was one of the most surprising and probably one of the most emotional revelations, is when she, embraced me in that aspect, and just that feeling of love and being contained and held in such a huge and divine way. So
I feel you. Great Mother was the one that I always had the most trouble with, and this it's all slotting into place, and every year it all comes a little bit deeper, and those bits you are in challenge with, those become the bits that are the most powerful for you on your journey. I'm going through a huge Great Mother initiation this year. It's not even possible. It's crazy. Thank you so much for sharing, Patty. So with Sister Year, Patty's right, it's this crazy transformation, because pretty much it's you going, hey Morgan le Fay, I think you're pretty rad, I want to learn to kind of be a bit more like you, and I really respect what you got going on, Morgan le Fay, let's work together. And then Morgan le Fay's like, yep, let's do it, you've said it now, no take backsies, let's go. And that's, she kind of just runs with you, and you enter her cauldron of transformation, and who you are when you go in isn't who you are when you come out, because it is a goddess mystery school, it's an initiatory journey, and it's not me necessarily doing the work, it's Morgan le Fay. She comes in, I give you some nice structure, I hold the space for you, I give you as much nerdy information about Morgan le Fay as I possibly can, and the work is done in that magical liminal space. And she comes in and she comes out, and working with Morgan le Fay doesn't mean you're not allowed to work with any other goddesses ever again, or that you're not even allowed to go on a Bridget bender halfway through your year. They all work together, because Morgan le Fay is a sister goddess. She freaking loves it when you go and work with other goddesses. She loves it when you're calling in more support. And she will, I have found, she will point you towards the right goddess or the right god. She doesn't not like dudes or anything. She will point you towards the right divine source for you in that moment, because she wants you to be supported. And she is in that feminine essence that knows that she's not in competition with everyone else. We're not in competition with everyone else. There isn't just enough love in my heart for Morgan le Fay, and anyone else is just not allowed, it's jealous. No, there's enough for Morgan le Fay and Aphrodite and Isis and Mary Magdalene and Oshun and Yemaya and everyone else that I love. And you find aspects of Morgan le Fay even in the places you weren't looking for them, because she's a shapeshifter, because she's subtle as all hell, and because she finds her way into places that you didn't think she would be. So Sister Year is open for registration. If you have any questions about Sister Year or about any Morgan le Fay stuff, just pop them in the chat. We're going to be here for another about 5 minutes, so I can answer any questions. Sister Year is open for registration until midnight London time on Monday the 25th. That's next Monday, which is the day that we start, which is super exciting. And we have some badass folks already signed up, so that's really cool. And we have an early bird price of $2,997 until until Thursday night at midnight. And then the price goes up by about just over $300 for the big girl panties price. And if you pay in, there's a payment plan. There's a pay in full pricing. You can also pay in full and get more support with me. If you're interested in that, you can just pop me a message, send me an email. And also, this is the first year I'm doing this. I'm also opening up some scholarship places for some people who need financial assistance to get onto these kind of programs. These programs cost a lot to put on, but I always think of tiny little Demi 20 years ago, literally spending every single penny of her paycheck on whatever priestess training or belly dance training she could possibly get her hands on. And I want to make sure that this stuff is accessible to those who need it. So we have a scholarship option that's going to be going on the website tonight. I'll pop it up just after this. And I'm accepting scholarship applications until either Friday or Saturday. It's on the website, wherever it is on the invitation page. So does anyone have any questions about Sister Year or about Morgan le Fay? Was there a thing about Morgan le Fay you wanted me to talk about, but I didn't say, and you're just waiting for me to mention this thing about Morgan le Fay? Pop it in the chat and I'll let you know. And I just want to tell you, and I'll leave you with a little bit of how to connect with her, whether or not you're drawn to join us in Sister Year. And it's really cool, so you totally should if you can. There are so many ways to connect with Morgan le Fay, and I really believe that the first portal to connect with Morgan le Fay and Avalon, especially since it's so shifty, since we have so little actual written information about it, it's through imagination. It's through inspiration. It's through throwing yourself into Pinterest and just finding every single picture and every single image of a misty sunrise or a fancy lady half naked in a lake that pings that Morgan le Fay essence for you, that pings that Avalon for you, and really building up that inspiration, reading books about her, reading mythologies of Arthur and Mabinogi, and trashy stories too. Make K-Bots Avalon high, anything you want that just sparks that inspiration, because Avalon is this home of inspiration, and the divine speaks to us through our imagination, so we need to feed it so that those channels can be strong, right? I always recommend creating a shrine for whatever goddess you're working with as a place where you can talk to them. It's like a metaphorical telephone to the divine, a shrine. And it's a wonderful idea to start giving offerings at the shrine. And that can just be putting a candle. This is my favorite way to give an offering. Lighting your candle on your shrine, lighting your incense. And candle and incense is important because that's food for the divine. Those are magical elements that open the gateways between our world and the divine world. It's food for the divine, food for the ancestors, food for the fairies. It's important, lighting a candle, lighting some incense, just thinking nice thoughts on your beautiful shrine, and just playing some music that makes you feel like Avalon as you're offering. I'm in love with the music of Elsa Fields right now. She's got some stuff on YouTube that's very good, well into my Elsa Fields. And Lorena McKinnett's always really good if you want to send some Avalon music up to the spheres. And who else? Those are my faves currently. And just really offering her your time and space. And especially when we're working with Morgan le Fay, we need to make space for her. She is so subtle, and our world does not have space for subtlety. Our world is distraction, distraction, stuff, stuff, stuff all the time. And if we think about ancient Avalon, and I remember going to Glastonbury this summer and going to the old marshes and just breathing in that silence, creating these pockets of silence and stillness so that your channel can be cleared. So that, I mean, it's like if your desktop, you have like a little messenger on your desktop, but it's covered up by everything else, closing down all the tabs. So then just the messenger, the telephone to the goddess is available. Just creating some space. So if she wants to call you, she can. There is a space in her life for you to call her. And that simple act of creating that empty space for the divine, without the expectation of the goddess necessarily coming in and going, hello, Patty, your mission in life now is to be a badass witch on the internet. Here is a list of all the marketing strategies you have to do today, without having that expectation, just creating this space, like a place in your schedule where the goddess can call you if you feel like it. It's really important to have that space, especially for a subtle goddess like Morgan le Fay, who could whisper away into the shadows without you even noticing. So those are the ways I would recommend connecting with Morgan le Fay. If you want to go deeper, of course, you can join us in Mystery School. I have some itty bitty courses if you're not ready for Mystery School and you want to just have a teeny wee taster, and I'll be sharing them a little bit more next week after Sister School registration is closed. If you are interested in Sister School, I will be popping the link to Sisters. I haven't got the link up for you guys. How very rude of me. The link for Sister School is, Cecilia is going to be in the chat right now, so you can have a little peek. Oops. By right now, I mean in just a second, because you know, my internet abilities today, they have been severely lacking. The link for Sister Year is in the chat. I'll pop it below this video if you're watching the replay. It is a really beautiful year of transformation, and I really, really believe that with Morgan le Fay, the more I walk as a priestess of Morgan le Fay, the more I do this stuff, the more I forget that that's what I'm doing, and then irrevocably reminded that everything in my life is actually about bringing this Morgan le Fay presence in the world. We're working to be powerful priestesses. We're working to be really smart spiritual practitioners, and we are working to be vessels of the energy of Morgan le Fay and take that part of us that is naturally a reflection of her. Because if you're drawn to her, there is something about her that you're like, I'm going to watch that terrible movie because Morgan le Fay's in it. If there's something in you that is like that is just resonating with Morgan le Fay, it's because you are a reflection of her in some way. And this class is about personal journey, yes, personal transformation, yes, really understanding your purpose and getting that kickstart, yes, really learning how to engage with your spirituality in a way that makes a big difference in your own life and in the life of people around you. Yeah, it's all that stuff too, but it's a priestess class, which means it's about polishing up your mirror of Morgan le Fay so you can shine it out in the world. And you could be an enchantress priestess of Morgan le Fay. Like Patty, I think Patty's quite an enchantress priestess of Morgan le Fay. You could be a shadow priestess of Morgan le Fay who's going to be holding people's hands from now till you're dead and while they go through their stuff. You could be a fairy lover priestess of Morgan le Fay. I think that's kind of a lot of what I am, which is, and just really dancing with that ecstasy and that strange, unspeakable nature of ecstasy that is divine goddess. Or you could be a healer, like our herbalist priestess Suzanne, who is here to work with herbs to help heal people's health stuff. Yeah, we all have a particular facet of Morgan le Fay. We're here to shine in the world, and in Sister Year, we really discover what that is. And I want to thank you so much for being with me here for this call. I really hope you learned a whole bunch of stuff about Morgan le Fay, and I've got really inspired about working with her, bringing her into your life, really curious about going back to that big old picture of the Wheel of the Year and thinking, Ooh, which bit of Morgan le Fay do I think I am the most? And I really hope you have a wonderful time taking all the stuff we've learned today and playing with it in your life. I'm sending you all so much love. Thank you all so much for coming. Oh, bye.